This video is sponsored by Film Convert.
So it's a very realistic film. It looks more realistic than Kingdom of Heaven or Robin Hood, if we're talking about your...
Q, thank you very much. You go f yourself. Go on.
While Ridley Scott might have been a bit unhappy with the characterization of his previous work for his new film at this time, The Last Duel, Scott wouldn't have too long to dwell on the past or the present, with news of the development of his next film coming on the very day he was finishing production on The Last Duel. This new film started under the initial title of Kit Bag, derived from the saying there is a general's staff hidden in every soldier's kit bag. Although, despite that title, it was no secret what the subject matter was: the story of Napoleon's life, told through both its personal side and the more well-known side, his role as a leader. And the historical nature of Napoleon has been the subject of fascination for many legendary directors over the years, from the first 5.5-hour epic Napoleon, created by Abel Gance, and Waterloo by Sergei Bondarchuk in 1970. But maybe no one else was infatuated with the story more so than director Stanley Kubrick, who envisioned Jack Nicholson as Napoleon and spent 2 years developing a completed screenplay and compiled an enormous amount of data on the time period to ensure accuracy and even scheduling out the entire production from locations and convincing the Romanian army to supply him with close to 50,000 soldiers to reenact his battle scenes. This film was unfortunately not well received by the studios and development of it stalled, but all the research was out there, and Kubrick in turn used all of this research to make the film Barry Lyndon, which inspired none other than Ridley Scott to create his first feature film, The Duelist, also set in the Napoleonic era. After Kubrick died, not having completed the project, the script was sent to Ridley Scott, but funny enough, Scott found it underwhelming because of its length in covering his birth to his death, and Scott decided to go a completely different direction. Funny enough though, for Ridley Scott's Napoleon film, he had another Joker actor other than Nicholson in mind for the role.
Joaquin Phoenix.
I could only think of Joaquin. He was always the man. And I'm thinking, Joaquin does look like Napoleon. And I didn't say that to him yet because I didn't want to make him feel, too important. But I was blown away by his outrageous film. It did as the Joker. I passed him by and said, "What do you think?" And he couldn't believe that I wanted to play Napoleon Bonaparte. That was the initial reaction.
Very early on, Scott was one of the many moviegoers who was captivated by the performance in the Joker film, another inspiration being a similar themed production Phoenix had collaborated with Scott on before, his performance as the Roman Emperor in the 23-year-old movie Gladiator. That being said, Scott did later mention that he had a second actor also in the cards, but decided not to give a name. In 2021, some more substantial news beyond the concept emerged when Apple Studios gave their backing to the project, with production planned for 2022 in the UK. Scott explained his interest in Napoleon by describing him as a man who came out of nowhere to rule everything, while contrasting Napoleon's war to conquer the globe with what he called the dictator's romantic war with his adulterous wife. This focus in this romantic dynamic of the character was an interesting take on the character who is often seen through the lens of empire building. But Scott's comments on Napoleon didn't escape controversy, as he caused anger among some commentators for comparing Napoleon to Hitler.
It was a quote out of context. And so out of it, and the who and why would you compare Napoleon with over history? I started, I think, with Charlemagne, Alexander the Great, da-da. If you don't think there was mass killing, you're naive. So any great leader is going to be involved in killing to get to that kind of victory. If you're in denial, if you deny that. You ain't gonna get me to say Napoleon Bonaparte is Adolf Hitler, sorry dude.
Despite the naysayers, however, Scott was confident in his portrayal of the general, and ultimately the title of the film was even revealed to be Napoleon in January 2022. Showing how deeply central that portrayal is to the film as a whole. In fact, some historians and French critics have been going after the film, calling it historically inaccurate. Scott told BBC in response to the criticism, "You really want me to answer that? It will have a bleep in it." Further, French critics said the film could be named Barbie and Ken Under the Empire, and French GQ saying the movie was deeply clumsy, unnatural, and unintentionally funny. And a biographer of Napoleon attacked it as very anti-French and very pro-British. Ridley Scott's response: "The French don't even like themselves." And that wasn't the only controversy surrounding this film, with actor Joaquin Phoenix reportedly getting stumped with the role 2 weeks prior to filming. Ridley Scott had to sit down with him for over 10 days and go scene by scene to work it out. Interestingly enough, in hiring Joaquin Phoenix for this role, Ridley Scott knew it would be unconventional, saying, "Joaquin is about as far from conventional as you can get." Not deliberately, but out of intuition. And that's what makes him tick. If something bothers him, he'll let you know. He made Napoleon special by constantly questioning. With that in mind, the actor worked with the director to actually rewrite the script to get to a place where Phoenix was more comfortable with the character.
So we sat down for many days re-discussing who this man may be, because he said, I don't see him on the page. Who was he?
Ridley Scott said that with Joaquin, we can rewrite the goddamn film because he's uncomfortable. And that kind of happened with Napoleon. We unpicked the film to help him focus on who Bonaparte was. I had to respect that because what was being said was incredibly constructive. It made it all grow bigger and better. This sounds oddly familiar to Leonardo DiCaprio getting Martin Scorsese to completely rewrite the script for The Killers of the Flower Moon. And it's quite fascinating to see two different directors of this caliber bend a bit to the will of the lead actors in such recent films. And one last controversy to note here. The way we've been augmenting our text and images for the past few months with one of my favorite new effects tools, Halation, which works directly with our sponsor, Film Convert's film emulation software. So what is halation though? Halation is simply an effect that occurs when bright areas bleed out around the edges of a dark area, really occurring when shooting on film. But in true Frame Voyager fashion, instead of testing it on our favorite travel videos, we've been experimenting to see what else we could do with it. One interesting way you can utilize it is with text. And since we already do a lot of film emulation looks in our video, we wanted to find a quick and easy way to make the text look a bit more filmic. So here's our super quick process. Throw Film Convert on an adjustment layer, lay out a text layer, but remember we said that halation bleeds more noticeably over darker areas. So a little trick that really helps to sell this is adding a small black border around the text. This not only enhances the glow, but it makes it way more legible. Then lastly, bring it over to After Effects and add a quick wiggle expression to get a little film-like movement to it. This all works in Premiere and in Resolve. So if you think this film emulation effect is super cool too, go check out our link to Film Convert's Black Friday sale, where you also get 10% off using our Frame Voyager code that's automatically applied as well. Now, back to the principal filming of Napoleon. Principal filming would begin on February 2022, and let's just say, working with Ridley Scott on any film is an experience to say the least.
Are there times when a star is so big that they literally just do what they want and there's nothing
Not with me.
diametric?
Not with me. Never, never, never. You can't let that happen. You never want confrontation, because being Northerner, I can take confrontation, it's over and it's forgotten in 8 minutes. And if you can't forget it, then you leave this terrible bruise that can go on right throughout the whole movie. So first of all, you've got to avoid it. Secondly, and if you can't, you've got to be assertive and make your point quickly so they can make it back. It's called intelligent negotiation.
In a New York article, Ridley Scott is said to have refused to embrace a gentler, more collaborative mode of authority, which Ridley Scott self-describes as a benevolent dictatorship. David Scarpa, the screenwriter of Napoleon, put it this way: "The striking thing about Ridley, more than anything else, is this enormous will. You send him pages while he's shooting. He shoots 12 hours a day. He then goes out to dinner with the actors. Then he works on editing what he shot that day. After that, he reads your pages. And the next day you get the email from Europe, and he storyboarded them. That would kill 90% of the directors in Hollywood."
Well, I like stress.
This drive and obsession with storyboarding began back when he was in art school, which he described as giving him a strong sense of visual narrative, and his experience in camera operation, something he had gained over the making of his own films, such as being the sole cameraman for the first Alien film. This gave him a sense of how to manage a shoot and communicate well with dozens of operators on the ground. This would be critical in a film that had such large-scale battle sequences, and not just one battle, but 6 out of the reported 66 battles Napoleon took part in were shot for this film. With its 2.5-hour runtime in store and a teased longer director's cut later on, you might assume that the making of the film would be quite lengthy and intensive, but actually, with the help of a large camera crew, things were streamlined a fair amount. To be fair though, shooting just one battle scene is an enormous task, and something Ridley Scott said that he would not be doing 50 takes with one camera on one shot and then turning around, instead of using a multi-cam approach that he said could shorten production time from a month to 6 days for the Napoleon shoot.
I think I shot it in 62 days. In 62 days, normally this would be about 110. I discovered in recent years, actually 20 years ago, that 2 cameras are twice as fast, 4 cameras are 4, and 6 and 8 cameras are 8 times faster. So you're scheduling a scene for the day, I'll be finished at 11 o'clock. So my speed has to be kept up with. Every department has to be able to cope with the speed that I work. When you're doing a war film, the scale of everything is so massive. I wanted to do it all in one go.
He would achieve this by using 11 to 14 cameras all at once.
I'd have 300 men, 100 horses, and 11 cameras in the field. It's amazing because you're actually reconstructing the real thing.
Which allowed them to get all of the shots they needed for the battle sequences in fewer takes than he would have been able to do in the past. This, of course, is where being able to use digital cinema cameras can be helpful, being able to record for a longer period of time without having to reload film cameras.
Don't try it if you're not used to it. If you have that idea to direct and whatever you're going to do next, you got to know the geometry of the scene. You got to walk in the morning knowing exactly what you're going to do so you can position your cameras accordingly. If you don't, you can be talking till 3 o'clock before your first shot. That's not a good idea.
Ridley Scott said, "Visual narrative is my strength. I find it very easy, therefore, to handle 8 or 11 cameras at once. On all of these things, Alien, Legend, Thelma and Louise, I operated the camera."
Well, so I have to be in a trailer with 11 monitors bigger than that. And I'm watching everything. So I was a very good camera operator. I can talk to an operator as an operator. Say, you missed it, you're too slow, too fast. Before you go, you're too wide, you go tighter.
For this film, they would utilize the Arri Alexa Mini LF, which honestly is an excellent camera for the style of film and the action that occurs within it. It also appears in some of the behind-the-scenes material that they are using either an Arri 65 or perhaps a Sony Venice. Interestingly enough, this created fast filmmaking approach Ridley Scott would also employ for his upcoming film Gladiator. Scott said, "I'm doing Gladiator 2 now in 54 days because I'm not doing 50 takes with one camera on one shot and then turning around. This normal fight scene that could take up to a month, I'll take in 6 days, so the savings are colossal." Now, one thing Ridley Scott has brought to the table while talking about this film is that there's very little CGI used. They tried to achieve everything as practically as possible.
I think you feel when it's fake. When it's AI, you know it's somehow artificial. All of this is real shooting.
Now, this seems to be a major trend for directors lately to use this in the marketing, just as Christopher Nolan did in Oppenheimer, and was criticized when a large portion of VFX artists were left out of the credits for the film, and also for not acknowledging VFX work actually being done. And this is something that we think should be fixed in the industry, as this is not a new occurrence, and films that can be said to have almost invisible CGI should have even more of a burden to credit the amazing work of VFX artists that made you think there was no CGI work done at all. If you haven't had your fill of Napoleon yet, take a look at this video we made on Stanley Kubrick's abandoned Napoleon film.